Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name's Corey Cameron and I am one of the early careers recruitment specialists here at Azets. I'm today joined by Bethany Hinks, who is one of our associate directors as well, and we're going to talk you through some of the secrets as a recruiter and a manager that we can provide to you to help you get a graduate role. We'll run through our entire application process, what to expect throughout the market if you're applying to other companies as well. Give you some hints and tips as to what Bethany looks for at the final interview stage that would then lead on to you hopefully getting an offer. And all the questions that you have as well, we'll also have a Q&A section at the end for you to ask us any questions at all, whether it be about assets, graduate roles, recruitment, anything like that. So what I'll do is I'll just do some introductions. So like I says, my name's Corey Cameron. I've worked in early careers recruitment for 6 years or so now. I previously worked for an energy company called Scottish Power and then a tech company called Capgemini. I started off doing some administration roles, and then I'm now responsible for the attraction, screening, selection, and processing of graduates, apprentices, and school leaver students onto our early careers programs across a massive plethora of professional finance focused qualifications and areas of the business. Bethany, can I just get you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. I'm Bethany Hinks. I'm an Associate Director in Audit based in our Birmingham office with Azets. I take a lead on the people and recruitment side in my department. So as Corey mentioned, I am the last person you see as part of the recruitment process, as I will be conducting the majority of the interviews that occur. I've actually conducted over 40 interviews so far this year for around 20 roles that we have specifically within Birmingham audit. 60% of those have been face-to-face interviews as well, which is something we are moving more towards, which has been great to see. I'm really passionate about the apprenticeship route into accountancy. So back in 2012, when I finished my A-levels, I actually joined a school leaver apprenticeship programme with Grant Thornton. That's where I did all my training and qualified. And I've now been at Azets for just over 3 years and really advocating for this being a great way to get into the profession.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Bethany. So yeah, we've got a massive amount of experience today. So like I said, please utilise the chat box, as we will have some time at the end to run over any questions that you have. So a bit about Azets. We're quite a massive company, to be fair. We have over 7,000 people across 160 offices dotted around Europe. I've just noticed that you'll see all the little dots on the map there where all of our offices are. We've actually just acquired some business in Ireland, and we've now got Azets Ireland now. So that's hot off the press, only happened a few days ago. So yeah, I just noticed that one there. We have over 120,000 clients, which it was huge when you think about the amount of services that we offer to different businesses and individuals, and have over 500 million pounds plus of turnover. So yeah, we're quite a big fish in terms of the accountancy and finance space. We have business areas like what Bethany works in audit. We've got tax, corporate tax, business advisory, some technology areas of the business as well that help companies innovate their systems to help them manage their finances and so on. So we have around about 500 plus graduate and school leaver roles across the year. They're dotted all around the country as well. So in the UK, we're as far down as, I'd say that looks around about like Bristol area, all the way up to the Highlands and Inverness and Aberdeen, where I am at the moment. So yeah, we've got offices absolutely everywhere essentially. So if you are interested in a finance role, we cover more or less all areas of finance, financial services, and accountancy programs, and we're based all around the country as well. if you were to apply, this is what our recruitment process looks like. It's quite similar to what you'll probably see across the entire early careers market. So with the majority of employers that you apply to, this is roughly what you'll see. Ours is of course tailored towards Azets as a business, what our business and stakeholders like Bethany look for, and the roles that we recruit into. So what I'll do is I'll talk you through in a really high level what each area of the recruitment process looks like, and then later on in the slides, I'll go into a little bit more detail as to what to expect. So first of all, you'd fill out an application form. This is where Azets is a bit different from a lot of other employers. Our application form is really small. It takes around about 5 to 10 minutes. It's more of a profile, so we could get an idea of your qualifications, where you are in the country, all your right to work statuses, and all that sort of thing. The majority of other companies will ask you for a motivational statement, ask you for bits and pieces around work experience, all that sort of stuff. Just to make it a little bit easier for our candidates, we're going to find out about all your work experience and motivation for applying, probably at the later stages, so the video interview and the final interview and presentation. So instead of asking it up front, we've made it really light touch. And then you'd attach your CV to that as well. You've then got the numeracy test and the situational judgment test. They're clumped together, so they essentially measure your numeracy skills because, well, we're an accountancy and finance-based company. Your numeracy skills are probably one of the main things that's going to need to be pretty strong about you as an individual. And then the situational judgment test is how you would behave and deal with different situations. They could both be done through a laptop or on a phone, take around about 20 minutes overall to complete both of them. And then you get a score at the end that would then, there's a bit of a benchmark essentially of what we look for. We've then got the video interview. So this is where we see the majority of candidates drop off. It requires a little bit more effort. It's 3 pre-recorded questions that we're going to ask you. They talk around things. They ask you to talk around things like what you know about Azets, why you'd want to apply for the role that you've applied to, your understanding of the qualification that you're looking to pursue in the future. So they're the types of questions that you'll get. Again, pretty standard throughout the market. The majority of employers will ask you to do a video interview, but for some reason we find that probably around about 20 to 30% of candidates will drop off and not complete this. So if you do make it past that initial situational judgment test and the numeracy test, please complete the video interview, because then you're already ahead of the curve, because a large proportion of candidates have went ahead and dropped out. It can be a bit nerve-wracking. I had to do one when I joined Capgemini way back in 2018, and it wasn't my most favorite experience. It can be quite daunting talking to a camera and nobody's essentially there. You're talking to a screen, but we're not looking for perfection. It's just for an opportunity for us to get to know you a little better. A CV doesn't tell us absolutely everything, whereas we want to hear more about you, your personality, just basically all those little bits that you can't get in writing through your CV. That's what the video interview is there for. Then we've got a group exercise. So as you can imagine, it helps us measure how well you work in a team or in a group. At Azets, you'll be working in teams constantly. There's lots of different parts to the business that all work together to help us provide an excellent service to our clients. So then it's really vital that our talent can work together, as well as work as individuals on their own work as well. The group exercise itself is really hard to prepare for because it's based on specific situations that we've come up with as a business that we expect that you might encounter in the future, and then you have to discuss those situations with the group. So it's really hard to prepare for because you won't know what to expect and what those scenarios actually are. The best bit of advice I could give you for that is the people that are on that group exercise with you, they might be your future colleagues, so you might as well get to know them in the upfront stages. And also, if you are quite nervous, just have as much input as you can. It's really hard for assessors to assess someone that's not put much of an input in. Because essentially, if you don't talk and give an opinion, then there's nothing really there for us to assess. So as much as it can be daunting speaking in a group, and especially with people that you've never met before, it's really important that you put your ideas across. We're not, again, looking for one type of person. We're not looking for just people that are good at leadership. We're not looking at just people that are only good at planning. We need all of those behaviours and qualities across all of our graduates to make sure that as a team and as a collective, we've got a really well-rounded group of people that can again deliver that best service to our clients. And then you've got the final interview and the presentation stage, which is where Bethany comes in. She's got lots of information and tips to give you based on all of her experience previously later on in the slides. So I'll leave that till later on. So I think one of the most vital parts of the start of your career, whether it be a graduate role, a school leaver role, or even when you're experienced, is actually choosing an organisation to apply to. As a recruiter, I don't know how many times, hundreds of times, I've called someone and they've not been entirely sure who I am or what company I'm calling from because they've applied to 30 different organisations because they really want a role. There's a bit more pressure after university as well, because once you finish your studies, the next natural stage is for you to get a role. I think a lot of students and graduates maybe overthink that a little bit and then start to do sort of spray and pray approach where they apply to lots of different roles. The problem with that is that you've probably not researched into the company, so it might be the wrong organisation for you. It's really easy to get mixed up with the different organisations that you've applied to. So then when that recruiter calls you, it's really difficult for you to have a quality conversation with them around the specific position and choose an individual and why you've applied to that organisation. When you are choosing a company to apply to, I'd always have a look at things like your strengths and if the job description that you're applying to matches the strengths that you have. So something that I always get asked is, well, what is a strength? And the best way I can describe it is it's something that you're good at and something that you enjoy at the same time. So I do a lot of printing, but I can't stand it. There's nothing fun about standing at a printer and waiting for 20-30 minutes for a load of documents to come out. But I'm quite good at it because it's an easy thing to do. But that's not one of my strengths. However, I really enjoy creating content, and I'm quite good at it. So I'd say that that's one of my strengths. So when I'm applying to a position, that's something that I take into account as well. I'm good at that, and I quite enjoy it. So let's go for a role that has that embedded into it. It's the exact same with any other role. You might be really good at audit-based tasks, but you might not like it. So that's probably not a good start, or vice versa. Um, you might be really good at say a tax-based role, but you might not like it as well. So what you're looking for is the two of them together to make sure that you put as much effort and passion into your whole application process, and then that will shine out through up until you meet one of our hiring managers. I'd always look at things like expectations, more so things like travel. Make sure that you're looking to actually relocate to the office that you've applied to, or that you can commute there. There'd be nothing worse than for it to get to the time where you're looking to join. It gets to 3 weeks in, and you're a bit sick of doing a 30-minute drive into the office. It would be quite frustrating for yourself, I could imagine. So just make sure that your expectations are realistic in terms of if the location's right for you, and as well have a look at the qualifications. So all of our early careers programs all have a professional qualification attached to them, whether that be the ACA qualification or the ATT or the AAT. They've they've all got massive commitments attached. The apprenticeships can be a tough gig. I went through digital marketing one during COVID, and it's one of the most difficult things I've done in my life was an apprenticeship, and that was when I was 26 at the time. So just make sure that that route's right for you. Studying and working at the same time can be pretty daunting. It takes a lot of drive and motivation and passion to get yourself through that. So I just make sure that it's definitely something that you want to do before you apply, because then that will set you up for the rest of your career with whatever employer you decide to be your next employer. So I want to cover off CVs. So this is a bit of a topic, and I think Bethany's going to touch on it a little bit later. Is CVs are becoming less and less important to a lot of organisations. A recruiter on average will look at your CV for 8 seconds, and that might seem a bit what way could put it, a bit harsh, because a lot of people put loads of time and effort into CVs, but they are manufactured pieces of information, and recruiters usually use them to scan for things like eligibility. So what we look for is things like your location to make sure that you are within a commutable or you can relocate. We look for things like your qualifications. So to make sure, just say you're applying for a graduate role, we want to make sure that you've got a degree to make sure that you're eligible. Same if it was a school leaver position, we'd have a look at things like your A levels and BTECs and GCSEs. So we use it for things like that rather than to make a decision on whether we're going to hire you or not. A hiring manager will never purely base their decision whether to hire you or not on a CV. We get all the information that we need to make a decision on you as an individual and to make sure that you are the right candidate for Azets in those latter stages, such as the video interview and then the final interview at the end. That being said, there is some CV writing mistakes that we see. The three mistakes are the top three based on the prospects.ac report for 2022, I believe. They have thousands of employers and students that work with them, and what they've done is asked the question around why would candidates be rejected due to their CV. So poor formatting's probably the first one. I see it quite a lot where somebody's tried to perhaps change the format of their CV and it's ended up in a plain text document and comes up in like Notepad or something. It's really difficult to read. All the information's inaccurate, and it's more than likely going to end up that the recruiter might have to reach out for you to you to get the information that they need, or it could result in you actually being rejected because although all the information might be there, the recruiter might not be able to see it, or it might be a bit unclear or come across the wrong way. Every CV should always be tailored to your application. So it seems like a lot of effort, but it goes back to what I was saying earlier around maybe apply to 3 or 4 employers rather than 20, and then have a CV for each of them. For the employers that do provide the CVs to their hiring managers, it goes it makes a massive difference if you mention the company and sort of your cover letter, your personal statement. You can then link your skills and your qualities to the job description that you've applied to. So for me as a recruiter, when I'm looking for a role that requires a certain skill set, if you've got your skills and qualities all the way up at the top, the format is really clear, and you've tailored it towards the job description that you've applied to, you've got a much better chance of making it through to the next stage. And then a lack of evidence and personality. Personality and passion are probably the two main words that you'll hear most recruiters use within the graduate and apprentice market. Reason being is, as an early careers employer, it's our responsibility to give you the skills and experiences that you need to make sure that you thrive in your career. But we want to make sure that you've got sort of that drive and motivation to go ahead and take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and achieve throughout your studies on the professional qualification. The main thing that I see is people just doing a cut and paste approach. So then it goes back to that failing to tailor your application, your CV to a specific application. The the amount of people who just put really generic hobbies in is mad, but hobbies they link in with skills. So always use the example of somebody that is a captain of a football team, has quite good leadership skills, but you might not put that in there because it seems quite trivial, but it's so important. Um, Other things that I don't see on there is the exact same formatting as well. So just make it stand out a little bit. You can have a CV in a PDF format, a Word format. You could do it as a presentation, a slide deck. There's loads of different ways you can write a CV, but we see a lot that look the same. So if you really want yours to stand out from the crowd, just do something a little bit different. And then application forms, that this kind of links in with the CV side. So a lot of companies will have killer questions in application forms. So make sure that they are extremely accurate, especially things around your right to work within the UK and your qualifications. So they are probably the two main things that a recruiter will screen your application on. Certainly Azets definitely will. And the reason being is that we need to, like I said previously, we need to make sure that you're eligible for the programme that you're potentially going to step on in the future. So if you put down, just say it was a school leaver programme and you put down that you've got a D in maths instead of C, that would hit below the entry requirements, and then unfortunately you'd end up being rejected. Or there's some drop down options on our application form around the right to work in the UK. So if you were to select that you didn't have the permanent right to work in the UK, or you didn't have the right to work in the UK at all, and you actually do, that would unfortunately mean that you'd be rejected from that initial part of the process, and you might have no idea why, because the majority of employers receive that many applications, they don't provide feedback for them. So definitely make sure that your application form information and data is as accurate as possible. For application forms that ask you for things like motivation and work experience, try not to use buzzwords. So I think most CVs or application forms, everybody seems to be a leader, but we don't just need leaders, and it seems to be sort of something that students seem to think that employers are looking for is always good leadership skills. We need loads of different personalities and lots of different qualities. So again, tailor your application form to you as an individual, and don't tell us what you think we want to hear. Um, Tell us about yourself. So tell us about you, your personality, you as an individual, not just what you've read on the internet, what a graduate recruiter looks for, because we can always tell essentially. Again, don't rush and take your time. It all links back again to, instead of doing 20 application forms, do 3 or 4 that you really want. Then the quality will go up. You'll have less risk of errors, which means you've got less risk of actually being rejected due to making mistakes within your application form as well. And then really think about why you're applying, and tell us why during the entire application process. So the group exercise itself, we'll run through this really quickly because it is actually quite self-explanatory. So like I said at the start, really speak up, give your opinions and ideas, and make it in a polite and professional manner. That's probably the top thing that you could do. If you don't speak up, and I know I keep on saying it, but we can't assess you, so we can't pass you. Everybody will have an opinion, but not everybody will express their opinion. And if you're one of the people who doesn't express it, then unfortunately we're basically unable to score you. and then you won't make it through to the interview part of the process. A lot of people just settle for the very first idea. It's one of the main things that I see. Or somebody will speak up and say, I think this, and then everybody will just agree. It's okay to disagree with people. You'll disagree with people in the workplace. It's natural. So it's really important that you express that in the right way, of course. But the first idea isn't always the right one, and it's absolutely fine to disagree with people. The assessors will look at how you dealt with that situation, of course, but it's absolutely fine to do so. So, researching the different business offerings, without giving too much away about the group exercise itself, um, like I said at the very start, it's how you deal with different situations. Within any group exercise, have a look at the entire document that's provided to you by the employer. Don't just have a quick scan through it. That's one of the main mistakes that that I see. Is people just have a quick scan and they pick the first one that makes sense, and then they don't consider the rest of them, or they don't compare them. So have a look at all the different scenarios and options. Our group exercise has a section that asks you to look up on current affairs. So I think that the economy and tax at the moment is crazy. That's a big topic, and that things like that within the Azets group exercise itself, you'll be able to link the news and current affairs to the decisions that you make during the group exercise process. And then as well, you'll have a chance to ask the recruiters any questions. So you're actually assessed by recruiters at Azets in the group exercise stage. So if you do have any questions about next steps, the interview, all that sort of stuff, you can take them to the group exercise. That's what we are there for. And then, Bethany, I'll hand over to you, if that's okay, to talk us through the interview and give us all the information that you have as a really experienced interviewer and manager.
That's great. Thank you, Corey. So, as previously mentioned, this is the first time I am involved within or the hiring manager, I should say, is involved within the process, and the first time that I will be meeting potential talent who will be coming to work with me. So put a point at the bottom of this slide, which is to reiterate really what Corey said, and it's something which I think a lot of companies are moving in the direction of now, is that as an interviewer, I will not actually have seen your CV, and it's very important really for you to be aware that your interviewer may not have seen your CV. And this is really a move to make sure that we are getting the most out of our time together during the interview, to kind of get rid of any perhaps potential bias or prejudgment, and to really make sure that the time we are talking together during the interview is really beneficial. So it's just something to bear in mind, that you may sometimes feel as though you're repeating yourself as perhaps what's already on your CV, but it really is your opportunity to sell yourself. So do not worry about repeating or talking through anything that you think has already been included as part of the CV. So in terms of the structure of the interview, I mentioned earlier that we're moving far more to a face-to-face, office-based interview moving forward. We can still be quite flexible in terms of offering interviews over Teams if commitments mean that a face-to-face interview isn't possible, but we're finding it's beneficial for both myself as an interviewer and candidates to actually come into the office to see where they could be working, and having that interview face-to-face has been really, really positive. So the interviews generally last between sort of 45 minutes to an hour. We'll start off by going through a bit of an introduction to how that interview will look, and you will be asked a number of sort of introductory questions to allow me to get to know you a bit better. So always be prepared to know how you want to introduce yourself, some of the things that you want to get across in terms of things you enjoy doing outside of work, and also being prepared to answer any questions on why you've chosen to study a particular topic as well. We would then move on to the presentation element of the interview. And again, this is something which is quite common as part of the recruitment process, to be asked to deliver a presentation. So you will be given a topic well in advance of your interview date as to what we would like you to present to us about. You will be given a brief. You will be asked to include certain elements within your presentation, and you will also be asked to make sure it's done to a time. So that is something which I'll come on to on the next slide, some kind of top tips around that presentation. But that is something which is quite common now within this process. So always be prepared for that. After we finished with the presentation, we'll go into some more sort of detailed questions, and these are kind of broken down into two aspects. So we've got kind of generalized, what I would call more sort of traditional type interview questions, and these are questions which you need to be prepared to answer around why you want to work for the particular company you've applied for, why you want to work in the role that you've applied for. Questions which really are trying to get through for me to understand your sort of motivation behind what you want to get out of your career. The next sort of set of questions focus a little bit more on competencies and demonstrating skills. So these questions can sometimes catch candidates a little bit off guard, but again, on the next slide, I'll kind of come into some top tips for how to kind of navigate your way through those types of questions. And finally, at the end of the interview, there will always be an opportunity for you to ask the interviewer any questions that you might have, whether that be about the role or the company, or even perhaps any advice that you would like to take on board from the interviewer. Can you just move to the next slide, please, Corey? Thank you. So in terms of what to prepare, so how to prepare for an interview, number one is to absolutely do your research, but use lots of different sources to do that research. So look on the company's website, try and search for any articles that might have come out about the company or the industry in which the company works in. Even have a look for any sort of financial statements or annual report which may be available about the company as well. Can be really, really useful to give you a lot more context around not just what the company is doing at the moment, but sort of any future plans that the company might have as well. Second point is around checking out your interviewer's LinkedIn profile. So you will be made aware in advance of your interview who will be the individual you'll be having your interview with. It's always really useful to have a little look on the LinkedIn page of your interviewer to understand a bit about that individual's journey, and that can also help you to think about any questions that you perhaps might want to ask at the end of your interview as well. The next 2 points are sort of logistical points, so making sure that you've planned your journey into the office and getting there nice and early so you can make sure you're in the best frame of mind and nice and calm and ready to get going with your interview, and making sure you are dressed nice and smartly, dressing to impress. You'll feel nice and confident by doing that as well. The next 2 points around role play and asking family or friends to kind of proofread your presentation are 2 points that I can really tell, I think, when somebody has made additional effort to make sure that their presentation flows really well, has been checked for spelling and grammar, where they've practiced it to time, for example. So making sure that you've perhaps set a bit of time aside to try and call upon a bit of support from family or friends to either proofread your presentation or maybe even ask them if you can do a bit of a dummy run with them as well. And the last point is, in terms of preparation, is to always be prepared and be confident in articulating why you want this particular role with this particular company, no matter where you're applying, because there will be so many accountancy roles out there with so many different companies, and it's really important to make sure you know why you've applied for example, Azets, and be prepared to talk about that. Moving on to some points around what I see in outstanding candidates who I finish an interview with and straight away I want to offer to them. So I just wanted to share some of these points on the right hand side of the screen. So outstanding candidates generally talk nice and slowly and concisely to really get their point across. There's nothing worse than talking too quickly, and I, as an interviewer, cannot really process everything that you might be saying, which could be relevant. So making sure you really are talking at a really good pace and really concisely getting your point across. Second point really is for face-to-face interviews is maintaining eye contact. So appreciate it can be difficult to maintain eye contact constantly, which we don't expect, but equally, please do make sure that you're not sort of staring at the floor, looking at the ceiling. Having that eye contact really is a great sign of confidence, which is really, really positive in an interview situation. The third point on that list is around providing structured answers, and this does sort of link into the point below, which is I tend to find really fantastic candidates take their time to answer the question, and they ask for the question to be repeated if they need to. And that is something which you can all take forward with any interview that you do, is if you just say to your interviewer, do you mind if I take a moment to think about that? Or do you mind repeating the question, please? That is absolutely fine, and far better to do that than to dive straight into answering a question that you might not actually be hitting the nail on the head with what we want to get out of that. And one way to make sure you are providing sort of the best answer that you can do is to structure your answer using the STAR method, which is set out on this slide. So talking first of all about the situation you're in, and then getting into the detail of what that particular task was within that situation, talking about any action that you did as part of that, and then finally talking about the result and the outcome. And generally that works in most questions, especially those sort of competency-based skill questions as well. The last couple of points in terms of what great candidates do is they have a broad range of examples to draw upon. I interview a lot of graduates who talk a lot about project reports or project activities that they've done as part of their university course, which is fine. Appreciate that is a big part of your degree, and there can be a lot of examples you can draw upon from that. But I've had a lot of candidates who do their presentation on that project exercise, and then they also use that example for 3 or 4 of the competency-based questions as well. So it's really important to have that broad range of examples that you can draw upon to demonstrate that you've been in different situations and you have been adaptable within that as well. And the last point around fantastic candidates is whether they are enjoying it or not is a different question, but they seem to really embrace the process. They smile, they are personable, and they build that relationship with you. So really try and make sure that is something that you are doing as part of the process. The bottom half of this slide gives some kind of presentation top tips and equally some presentation downfalls. So generally, when you are doing your presentation, especially if it's face-to-face, it's great to stand up at the front of the room and present. I think candidates feel a lot more confident in doing that. It might feel a little daunting in the beginning, but generally I've noticed a huge difference in how candidates' confidence grows when they stand up to present. making sure you hit the brief. So as I previously mentioned, you will have a very detailed brief as to what we need from your presentation. So making sure you're confident that you've hit all of those points. And finally, having a lot of energy when you're presenting. So if you're standing in front of your interviewer presenting, changing kind of the tone of your voice, using your body language to really show that you're passionate about what you're talking about. Some of the presentation downfalls, so just points to note and to take forward if you are ever going to be in a situation where you need to present. A lot of candidates don't introduce their presentation topic very well or add a lot of context as to what they are going to be talking about, which is very easy to do. If you're really passionate about something and it's been a huge part of your life, it can be quite easy to overlook almost starting at step one and talking about a subject matter that might be completely new to the interviewer. So just almost really dumbing down the subject you might be talking about to make sure that actually you've given it an appropriate introduction so that the person on the receiving end of your presentation has a good understanding going into it. The second point is around the sort of aesthetics of the presentation. So I've sat through a few presentations where I've literally had on the screen presented to me paragraphs and paragraphs of information where students have really just read those paragraphs to me. So making sure you're using graphics, bullet points is a really good way of making sure you're not overloading that information. And finally is where candidates have just talked way too fast when they've been presenting, or they've run over considerably on their time. So again, kind of having those practice runs with family members or friends can really, really be useful to not only get feedback from them, but to also get yourself comfortable with presenting to time. Can we move on to the next slide, Corey? Great.
Sure. So what I'll do just now, Bethany, is I've got some questions for you that I've thought up that candidates have asked me throughout my entire time within early careers recruitment, and then we've also got some questions in the chat as well for after these. So I just wanted to ask you, as a manager, what's the first thing you look for in a candidate that you're interviewing?
So I think the first thing that's really important is making sure that the individual is very personable, and someone that I can see very easily building relationships with colleagues and clients. Because one of the first things I will always think is this person is potentially going to be representing Azets. They're going to be in front of clients, they're going to be talking and articulating things to people external to our business. And a lot of the skills to do the job, such as you know, the kind of ins and outs of audit, can be learnt and will be learnt as part of the professional qualification the candidate goes through. But making sure that you've got those sort of personable skills is really, really important, and that includes being very sort of open and engaged and present during the process. And that's something which candidates, I think, do need to make a conscious effort to make sure that they are coming across as though they are engaged and present within that.
Brilliant, thanks for that. And then I know you touched on it just in the previous slide there, but just say you had 4 really good candidates that had taken all your advice on board, but you only had to hire one. What would make that one graduate stand out from the crowd?
For me, it's always going to be demonstrating kind of extracurricular activities that they've done. I interviewed one individual and he always stands out in my mind as being somebody who really did shine because he was able to draw upon experience from so many aspects of his life. So whether that includes, you know, part-time work, volunteering, arranging some work experience off the individual's own back to make sure that they are sort of in the best place possible to get into the place of work, whether they've been a peer mentor, done any sort of hobbies or particular interests. That really does stand out to me, because that shows that that individual is very motivated and ambitious in what they want to do, to make sure they have got that well-rounded experience from all aspects of their life.
Definitely. And then you mentioned earlier that you'd interviewed, was it 40 people for 20 roles this year? So
And
was it,
counting, so
and
yeah.
counting, there we
Yeah.
go. So out of the ones that didn't quite make it, was there any common themes in those candidates that caused them to not be offered a position?
Um, yes, so a lot of the themes I have already touched on. So a lot of candidates didn't have a lot of examples to really talk about in some of their sort of competency skill questions. And generally, candidates who don't perform as well tend to provide a lot more high level brief answers that don't always hit the nail on the head when it comes to the question. So that really comes down to the fact they haven't really taken the time to understand what the question is that I'm asking, and they haven't asked me to repeat the question. They go straight in with an answer and then run out of things to say, because they're not actually quite sure, I don't think, about how they've perhaps structured the answer correctly. I've also had a couple of instances where in interviews that have been conducted, candidates don't really understand some of the values that we have at Azets. And a lot of companies, I think most companies now, have either a mission statement or values that they want their employees to demonstrate and live by. So really making sure that you are up to speed on those and can be prepared to talk about them as well is something that has been a bit of a theme.
Brilliant, thanks for that. And then if you were to give the students today one piece of advice ahead of their next graduate interview, what piece of advice would you give them?
Um, I think there's probably two aspects to this. So I just make sure you're really confident going in there, that you've researched the role and the company as much as you can do. Don't be afraid to take some like flashcards in with notes. I'm more than happy when a candidate comes in and has a few, maybe not really long paragraphs of information, but if they've got a few sort of pointers that they know will help prompt them through the interview, then that's absolutely fine. And just make sure you take your time, lots of deep breaths, and be yourself, because this really is an opportunity for you to sell yourself, but equally for you to have a think about whether this role and this company is right for you. So make sure you do see it as that two-way process as well.
Brilliant, thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
We'll then move on to the questions then. I think we've got a fair few in the chat, and we've got 10, 15 minutes or so to run over those. If anybody does have any questions for Bethany, just fire them in just now. I'll go from the top to the bottom from these, so I'm guessing you'll probably have a bit more towards the end of the session, Bethany. So we'll see how it goes. So I've got one here. What are some basic answers that an employer to see on a situational test from a candidate? So the situational judgment tests are multiple choice. An example of a question would be, I'm trying to think. I've not done one in many moons now. Something along the lines of, you have X amount of tasks to do, and one of your colleagues comes up to you and asks you to help with a bulk of printing. What would you do in this situation? Then it would give you 4 or 5 answers, and then each answer would have like a weighting that would then contribute to your final score. None of the answers are right or wrong. The majority of the answers will be really likely scenarios of things that you might do, but there's always going to be preferred ones that are ranked and weighted. Is there a time limit on the numerical test? There is. So it's 30 minutes. However, if you do need some additional time, you can just reach out to the interviewer. You'll be given their contact details as soon as you as soon as you're invited to the numerical test, and then we can arrange to extend the time for you if you do have any if you do need any additional support through that step of the process. We've got another one there. So how long do you get for each question in the video interview? So 3 minutes is the limit. What I would say is any answers that are under a minute would, in my experience, be particularly weak. I wouldn't try to fill up all of the time on purpose, so don't target 3 minutes on the button, but try to make sure that your answers aren't brief. I do see a lot of video interviews that the answers are 20 seconds, and it's really the content isn't there for us to pass you through to the next stage. So you do get 3 minutes, but take as long as you need up to that stage, but don't make it a target, because what will end up happening is you'll start to fill time and waffling a bit, and then that will come across in a negative way. So yeah, just make sure that you use as much time as you need, but within that 3 minutes, whilst not trying to aim for getting it bang on that full amount of time. Here's one here that says, if I wish to change careers when seeking employment after graduating in my new profession, do I need to show in my CV my previous work experience that is not very relevant to my new career? I say any experience is relevant. Bethany touched on it a second ago. So any even extracurricular activities that you've done, it shows things like your motivation for getting through that period in your life. You would have picked up skills and competencies through your entire life, from secondary school all the way up until employment. So definitely include it in there. Are there any practice questions for the video interview and other tests? So this is where Azets are a bit different from other graduate employers. You actually get to record your questions as many times as you like with the video interviews. The reason that we do that is to make sure that you have the best opportunity possible to understand what we're asking you, and we know it's a high pressure environment. I guess that's why we see so many people drop off that stage of the process, because it is a bit of going into the unknown. By providing you with the opportunity to answer your questions as many times as you like, you're going to be a lot more comfortable. One thing I would say, and there is a downside to that, is we do get a lot of answers that are then over scripted. You can take too many attempts. One thing I would say is try to not overthink it. Try to be as natural as possible. Bring your personality out, because that'll really shine through in that stage of the process. But you do get multiple attempts to record it. So if I still remember when I done a video interview years ago for that role at Capgemini that I keep talking about, my very first go, I just burst out laughing, and I don't know why. I think it was just nerves. So if that happens, really don't worry about it. You'll get another shot at it. Can this interview be downloaded? Really good point by Beth. Sorry, could you rephrase that? I don't think I'm maybe picking that up wrong. Can this interview be downloaded? I think you mean, is it this session? Maybe I'm reading that wrong. Maybe try rewording that and we can come back to that. I think that was Avash that asked that question. Here's one for you, Beth. So how would you answer certain interview questions when you don't have any professional finance / accounting related experience at all?
Yeah, so we do have a number of candidates who interview who don't have any accounting or finance experience. They haven't done a accounting or finance degree. And that doesn't matter at all. That is not in any way, shape, or form a setback or put you on the back foot whatsoever. When I actually interviewed for my school leaver role, I hadn't done any accounting A level or work experience. It's more around recognizing what you have done, drawing on what you've learned from your experiences, from any other work you've done, any hobbies that you've done, any volunteering you've done, and how you would apply those experiences and skills and knowledge that you've learned from that into your role. Because you are going to be working in teams, you are going to be working with clients and managing relationships and presenting information. So it's really about looking at what you've done, what you've learned, and how you would apply that moving forward is really what I'd say for that question.
Brilliant. We've got another one there that I'm probably going to pass this to you, Bethany. Can someone with 10 years experience apply for a graduate role? I guess that comes across, when do you stop being a trainee versus when are you actually experienced, and when would that, I don't think there's a hard cut off, but what would you consider as an experienced hire, Bethany?
Yeah, so in answer to that question, yes, absolutely. So when we say graduate role or school leaver role, we're really just talking about the sort of entry level requirement to get into that role. So our school leavers, we expect them to have done A levels or equivalent. Our graduates are applying to us because they have a degree, whether that's in accountancy and finance, or it could be in geography, it could be in psychology, it could be anything. So yes, anybody can apply, no matter how long it's been since you left university or school.
Bro, we've got another one here that says, does HR mind if there are time gaps in my CV? There will be some gaps in your CV if you have past experience that is not mentioned in it. So in terms of gaps in your CV, people go traveling. It's really common for students to go away and do some traveling for a few years. We don't look at it in a negative manner at all. Over COVID, people got made redundant. It happens to people. Um, we For some roles we do require security clearance, so that's something that we'd want to make sure is that you went out the country for a massive period of time. But usually there's absolutely no problem at all whatsoever. Um, at the end of the day, it happens, and people do unfortunately lose their jobs, or they do like to go traveling or take a break, take some time out, and we expect that as recruiters, so that wouldn't go in against you negatively at all whatsoever. We then have tips on how to be successful in a video interview. Really similar to some of the points that Bethany made. Be personable, really prepare for it. Give us some examples. Don't don't overthink it. So if you take 10 tries, the chances are by the end of it, you'll have a really well rehearsed scripted answer that might come across a bit robotic, and we want that to be a more of a free flowing natural answer. So it's great to prepare, but there's also over preparing that could do the opposite, and it make you just sound a bit robotic, and make the answer sound a bit rehearsed. I would also say rehearse in front of a camera. So every laptop or phone these days has a front facing camera. Just talk into it. Have a look on websites like prospects.ac. Hire View is one that's really well used quite a lot and well known by early careers recruiters as a video interview platform. They all have hints and tips and demo interviews and all sorts that you could use. HireView has a YouTube channel dedicated to helping candidates get through that video interview stage. They have probably about 5 hours ish at the very least of content that's really focused on the best ways to go about your video interview as well. And again, like Bethany said earlier, research is key. If you log on, turn on the camera, and don't do any research at all, it's definitely going to show. Have a look into who the company is that you're applying to. So who Azets are, have a look at their values, the areas that we specialise in, have a look at the qualification that you've applied to, how long that qualification takes, what you're really getting yourself in for. Have a really good think about why you've applied, because that's that motivation piece. Without motivation, unfortunately, you probably won't get very far, because your heart's not in it, and we want you to show up front that this is definitely what you want to do as a career with us as your graduate employer. We're just going to wrap up in a minute. I've got
I think there's just one more question which we've probably got time to answer, which is, what would be a good way to say how my job in sales in John Lewis can apply to an accounting graduate role? So this is a really good question. So I'd have a think about some of the key skills and areas that you've developed within that role. So presumably, if you are selling products, you are having to build a relationship with customers, you are having to build a relationship with your team. So have a think about kind of how you've approached that, how you were able to demonstrate what approach you would take to building those relationships. There may be some target driven work within your role. I'm not sure if that's the case. Then that might mean you're used to working under pressure. So how you manage that, how you ensure that you are achieving what you need to in terms of delivering those targets, but how you manage your time to make sure that you are giving your best self at work as well. So really just kind of thinking of kind of the key areas of your responsibilities, what skills you use to deliver those responsibilities, and then how you would apply them in a role within finance and accounting. So hopefully that answers that question.
Drill. Is that them all?
I think that's everything, yeah.
I think that's us then. So for everybody that's still here, thank you very much for attending today's session. I personally really enjoyed it. I've not done one of these in a long time, and they're one of my favourite things to do. And then, yeah, Bethany, thanks so much for sharing your insights. That was really knowledgeable for me as a recruiter. So I'm sure the graduates really taken away a lot from drawing on the experience and stuff that you've got. So thanks very much for that.
No problem. Thank you for asking me.